Hello, and we are now continuing to study the book Victory of Light from the Hasidic Heritage series, and we have arrived at page 31. The question surrounded the concept of Hanukkah and the comparison of Hanukkah to the festival of Sukkot. Festival of Sukkot takes place a week from Wednesday night. And the question is, what kind of connection can there be between the two? Some may say, well, they're both 8 days. Well, the question is then, why would these two be chosen as the ones who last for 8 days, representing something that transcends the normal, regular, which is a 7-day? So why is it these two represent that lofty level? Also, why is a Hanukkah an 8-branch menorah when in the temple it was, as this menorah indicates, a 7-branch menorah? And why is the menorah on Hanukkah lit at nighttime after sunset, whereas the one in the temple had to be lit prior to sunset? Those are the questions that he asked. Now, page 31, we begin to tackle this issue. Unukudas habeir bozeh. The essence, a little bit of Hebrew there. The essence of the explanation is that the function of the Hanukkah lights is to illuminate the darkness. In other words, unlike the temple lights, which were not there for illumination of darkness, they were simply there for honor, or for ambiance, or for illuminating to the outside of the temple, regardless of light or dark. Menorah of Hanukkah emphasizes unequivocally that this is to illuminate darkness. That is the whole focus of Hanukkah. To explain, the miracle of Hanukkah took place after the Greeks entered the sanctuary and defiled all the oils that were in the sanctuary. In other words, the overwhelming darkness of the Greeks was to such a degree that not only did they enter the sanctuary and defile it, they also defiled all the oils in the sanctuary. They made it an important focus of their defilement, not just to walk through the temple and do what they wanted there, which in and of itself is a major affront to Jewish people. Imagine somebody walking into your house, into your bedroom, and doing something as simple or as even unoffensive as rearranging the furniture. I want the bed to be on this side, so I'm going to rearrange it for you. Imagine you get a guest who comes to your house, and while you're away shopping, walks into your bedroom and puts the drawers on this side and puts the bed on that side. When you come home, you say, what happened here? He said, well, I didn't like the configuration of the furniture, so I changed it. Say, what? Huh? It's not your house. That's not your room. I know, but I just didn't like it. But it's not for you to like. I know, but I still. Could you imagine if somebody did something as unobtrusive as that? I'm not talking about taking out the stuff and throwing it all over the place and making a mess. I'm talking about just neatly moving the furniture. Mother-in-law?
I said that's a mother-in-law's story.
That's a sister story.
That would
I can
be.
relate to mother-in-law.
It would be extremely and terribly offensive. I went this past week to our old house. I had my children with me, some of my children with me, coming on Monday, Labor Day. And we just stopped by that street, so we went in there and we looked into the house and we saw that people were beginning to move in there. We had sold it to a company who refixed it, redid everything, and then they sold it out, I guess. We're out of it. But it was interesting to go back to see. But then when I looked into the bedroom, to the master bedroom, they had changed around the whole configuration. I almost didn't recognize the room. Now, it's their house. They'll do whatever they want with it. It's their business. And, it's once you buy your property, it's yours. But to have a guest come in and tell you how to have your furniture, I mean, how offensive would that be? Just for the thought of it. If somebody walked into your house and decided how they think your house should go. Now, the Torah says, this is what I want from my temple. This is how you need to build it. Then you go into the prophets, the book of Kings, and it talks how Solomon built the temple. Then they rebuilt the temple, the second temple, the book of Ezra talks about that, book of Ezekiel. So they rebuild the temple and walk the Greeks. And they do what they want. But not just do they rearrange furniture, they make a mess. They defile it. They do things to it that we are told clearly not to do. Because if you did it, it would be a defilement of it. So they went and defiled the temple. Not only that though, but they also went to look for the oil. There was something about the oil that bothered them. They didn't pour the oil out. They could have just opened up all the barrels or all the jugs or all the cruises of oil and poured them out. They didn't do that. They defiled it. There's something about that is particularly offensive and difficult, which gives us an indication of what this miracle really is and why are we celebrating it the way we celebrate it. If you look at footnote number 29, although the Greeks defiled the entire sanctuary as a whole, the Talmud makes specific mention of the fact that they defiled all the oils that were in the sanctuary. This indicates that in the context of the story of Hanukkah, the defilement of the oil was a more grievous act than the general defilement of the sanctuary. That's unbelievable. And therefore deserves specific mention, as will be explained further. This discourse now proceeds to explain the deeper significance of oil. What is oil? Okay, holy oil. Back to the text. Oil corresponds to the level of Kodesh, or the word Kodesh in Hebrew means holy. We say Shabbos Kodesh. The Yom Kippur is called Yom HaKadosh, the holy day. Holiness. So oil corresponds to that level of holy. As it says, oil of holy anointment. And one more line over here. Holy or Kodesh is a word unto itself. Now let's go look down at the footnotes. Footnote number 31. Second paragraph. The Hebrew word Kodesh, and now it's written in Hebrew, Kodesh, means both holy and separate. Let's stop here for a second. The fact that something is holy indicates that it is separate from everything else. That's why it's holy and other things as opposed to other things which are not holy or unholy. And when you say something is holy, it defines that thing as separate from others because it's holy. So the ark, for example, the Torah, that's holy, and they are separated. The ark separates the Torah from everyone else. It's a little closet. It keeps it hidden there because the Torah is separate, and it only comes out in special times. And when it does, there are all kinds of laws that govern how one approaches the Torah and how it's read and what happens, what doesn't happen, and so on. So the word Kodesh, when you say holy, by definition, it means it's separate from other things. It's trying to define something as holy versus what is around it, what may not be holy. So Kodesh indicates that this is a separateness. In truth, these two meanings complement each other. One who is holy is so precisely because he is distinct, separate in degree from the masses. A person can be holy, an object can be holy, a place can be holy. You have the Holy Land, you have the Holy Wall, and so on. Now, Hasidic teachings explain that in the language of the mystics, oil refers to the dimension of Kodesh. When you say oil, it also refers to something that is holy. A dimension that is holy, removed, and transcendent. Something that is demonstrated in oil's physical property, in its tendency to separate from and float above other liquids. You can always tell when something is oily because it doesn't seem to want to go away very easily. In fact, it always rises to the top. And it stays on your hands, and water itself doesn't really to get rid of it. You've got to find something else soluble. You gotta have warm water, you gotta have soap, or if it's really heavy, greasy oil, you gotta have something really heavy, because oil sticks to the top. It separates itself. In simple terms, oil refers to a dimension that is so lofty that it is considered to be completely removed and separate from that which lies below it. And it was this lofty oil dimension that the Greeks wished to defile. The practical significance of this will be explained below from chapter 3 and on. But right now, he's defining oil. Oil rises to the top. It is similar to that word kodesh, or holy, which means separate. Oil is a separate liquid. All other liquids mix together. So when you pour orange juice and apple juice, they mix together. When you pour water and blood, it mixes together. Any kind of liquid, you can just stir it up and it mixes together. But when you put oil into something, it always rises to the top. It doesn't mix. That's its physical dimension, because spiritually, the idea of oil is something that is transcendent or separate or removed and so on. It represents that idea, the idea of something that contains the dimension of holiness. So when you say oil, you mean holy. Let's look at footnote number 32. He said, in the last line that we learned, was holy is a word unto itself. What in the world does that mean? Holiness is a word unto itself, and cleanliness is what? So let's see here. There are two variations of the Hebrew word for holy. Kadosh and Kodesh. Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh is in the prayers. That's from the book of Isaiah, Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. And then you have Kodesh, also meaning holy. The difference between them, Kadosh is used as an adjective to describe something that is holy. So I can say Aaron can be Kadosh. A person can be Kadosh. While Kodesh is a noun or a word unto itself, referring to holiness itself. I'm not going to get into the difference between nouns and adjectives, but adjective is something that you use with something else. That's what the adjective is. And the noun is a word unto itself. Kodesh is therefore loftier than Kadosh, as it refers not to something that has become holy, but rather to holiness. Another difference between them, in the scriptural spellings, Kadosh contains the letter Vav. You see there are 4 Hebrew letters over there. The third one is a Vav, and that is only found in the word Kadosh, while Kodesh is written without a Vav. You'll see there's only 3 letters in the second Hebrew word. What is the deeper significance of the Vav, that letter Vav? Vav is the 6th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and it sounds like a V, Vav. It sounds like the way you say it. In Kabbalah and Chassidus, it is explained that the Vav alludes to a downward spiritual flow. If you look at the shape of the letter Vav, which is again the 3rd letter in that first word up there, you see it's going straight down. It's a line that points down. That's all the letter goes. It starts from the top, has a little heading on the top, and then it just goes straight down. I.e., the act in which a higher spiritual dimension is transmitted to a lower spiritual dimension. When you look at the letter indicates that something is going from top down to the bottom. This is alluded to in the Vav, specifically, as the Vav is a straight line written in a downward motion. It goes down to the bottom of the line, in other words, to the bottom line, and that's where it stops. In other words, so it goes from top to bottom. It doesn't expand this way, it doesn't expand that way, it doesn't have little pieces that come out there, come out there. It goes straight down. That's its job. So that when you have a letter Vav inside of a word, it indicates that that word is telling you we're going from top down to the bottom. When you don't have that letter in the word, that means that there is no transmission downwards. It's staying upwards. It's lofty. It's transcendent, as he explains in this paragraph. Now, as mentioned above, both Kadosh and Kodesh, Kadosh with the Vav, Kodesh without the Vav, mean holy. They thus both refer to spiritual dimensions that are inherently transcendent or separate from that which lies beneath them, because they're both called holy, and holy means something that's separate. Yet there is a fundamental difference between them. Kadosh with a Vav alludes to a dimension that, while inherently transcendent, does ultimately descend to influence the lower spheres. Kadosh has the Vav is taking that word down. So yes, you are separate, but you're focused, your journey is going down to the lower dimensions. Kodesh, however, which has no Vav, refers to a dimension that is so transcendent that it cannot descend in any way or form. And that's why it says it's a word unto itself. And it is to this level of Kodesh that oil corresponds. Oil corresponds to the higher level of Kodesh without the Vav, which means it's not heading down. Oil always will rise to the top. That's its physical characteristic, and that's how it is in the spiritual dimension. When you use the word oil, or shemen in Hebrew, it is a reference to something that is not just separated, but remains separated. It's not heading downwards. Okay, so back now to the text. Oil corresponds to the level of Kodesh holy, as it says, oil of holy anointment. Holy, Kodesh, is a word unto itself. Kodesh is something without a Vav. It's similar to oil, which floats on top of all liquids and does not mix with them. It follows that the defilement of the sanctuary's oils by the Greeks is, in this aspect, more grievous than the defilement of the sanctuary itself, even though the holiness of the sanctuary ranks highly in the 10 levels of holiness. Again, the defilement of oil was more sinful, was more problematic than the sanctuary, than a defilement of the sanctuary, although the sanctuary is holier than oil, of course. Now, let's look at the footnotes, number 35. The deeper implication of the Greeks defiling the sanctuary oil is that they had tainted an extremely lofty dimension of spirituality, a level that is utterly transcendent or holy. The Greeks were intent on defiling, not destroying, but defiling that which is very high, very lofty. So they looked for the oil specifically to defile the oil, because the oil represents this high level, transcendent level, this holy level, separate level. So they were looking for the oil, and the sages make special mention of that, and they defile the oil, because the oil represents something that is above and transcendent. Now, what are the 10 levels of holiness? So, 36. The holiness of the sanctuary ranks only one level below the holiness of the Holy of Holies, which is the highest, or the 10th level. Kalim 1:9, Rambam, and so on. Yet, in the context of what the Greeks wished to achieve, the defilement of the oil was more severe than the general defilement of the sanctuary. Sanctuary is second to highest holiness, but they tried to get even deeper than that, which is why they targeted the oil. And here are the 10 levels of holiness. Number 1, walled cities within the land of Israel. Number 2, Jerusalem has its higher holiness than other cities in Israel. 3, the Temple Mount, the whole mountain is a higher level than the city of Jerusalem itself. Number 4, the Chayil, or the outer limits of the actual Beit HaMikdash, the actual temple, like the courtyard of the actual temple, was holier than the rest of the Temple Mount. Number 5, the women's courtyard was holier than the outer courtyard of the temple. Number 6, the Israelite courtyard was holier than the women's courtyard. These were all progressive steps within the temple compound. Number 7, the Kohanim's courtyard was more holy than the Israelites' courtyard. Number 8, between the altar and the antechamber meaning the first room of the temple structure itself, where the menorah and the table and so on were housed, that was more holy than the priestly courtyard. Number 9, the sanctuary, that's the temple that he was talking about, where the Greeks entered. In there was the menorah, and in there was the other furniture. So that was more holy than the space between the altar and the antechamber. And number 10, the Holy of Holies was the holiest place where the high priest entered only once a year on Yom Kippur, which we commemorate at the end of this week. Those were the 10 levels of holiness, beginning from the general land of Israel to the Holy of Holies in the temple in Jerusalem. So the sanctuary, or the temple, was number 9 on the list of 10. Second highest holiest place in the world, according to Jewish law. And that wasn't enough for the Greeks to defile. They had to go and defile something more meaning oil, the oil. It was very important to them to get that oil. Let's see, back in the text. This is evidenced also by the fact that even after your children came and purified your temple, these are the words of the prayer that we say on Hanukkah, on all 8 days, through all the services, the Amidah service, plus in the blessings and the grace after meals when we bench, what we call benching. We also mention this prayer. And this prayer describes the miracle, so it describes what happened. So it says, and after that your children came and they cleaned it out. So even after that, they needed a miracle in order to light the menorah, beginning with the miracle of they found one pure jug sealed with the seal of the high priest. So, even after they cleaned out the place, they were still not finished. When they undefiled the sanctuary, they still needed to find oil in order to kindle the menorah that was now undefiled as they cleaned it out. So they needed a miracle, and the first miracle was that they actually found a leftover cruse of oil that they didn't have. In other words, they had plenty of oils, but they were all defiled. Now they had to find one more. So the fact that they had to find one more was a miracle. This miracle was an expression of the infinite light, which we'll talk about in a minute, which transcends Hishtalshalut. The infinite light that transcends Hishtalshalut. 40. Or Ein Sof in the Hebrew. Or means light, Ein means no, Sof means end. Light with no end, or infinite light. The Kabbalists use the term Ein Sof to refer to the most absolute infinite force of God. They use this term, infinite light, when they look at the most absolute infinite force of God, totally beyond description, knowledge, and comprehension, completely beyond any boundaries, the essence of God Himself. God's infinite expression and revelation, the infinite light, is termed in Hebrew or Ein Sof, light to no end. For as to why the mystics chose to refer to the effusion of divinity as light, see this book. So, when you talk about God, how do you define God? You say God. What is God?
A complete, total creator and ruler of the world.
If you want to describe God as something, how would you describe God?
Himself.
What?
Our source.
Ein Sof, no end, infinite. Some people say a massive light. Some will say like a power or electricity. There's no definition that can physically express what the essence of God is. Yeah, you can say, I'll go outside and say, I find God in trees. I find God in elephants. I find God in godly people. That's good. But that's only an expression of God that's limited to the elephant or to the tree or whoever or whatever else rocks your boat.
So undefinable. Undefinable.
Yeah, you thought?
It was Mel Brooks.
Who?
Mel Brooks.
That must be an actor.
Comedian, famous forever. Known for the.
He plays God.
He plays Moses.
That's.
Oh, that's right. Now,
I'm sorry. You mean. I'm sorry, but you mean what's his name? Old man Burns.
oh yes, George Burns.
George
Oh,
Burns.
that's it.
No, this is a real Jewish man. Mel Brooks.
The name of Brooks.
I got it.
Yes.
But yeah,
His name was Brookstein or something.
No, I think it was really Brooks.
Well,
No.
let's change from somebody.
Short.
Short
Well,
notice.
nobody can
Short
determine where
line,
my
and
maiden name came from. It's Blafkin,
Blafkin.
Blafkin. And nobody knows what it was before.
Just
You
don't
can't
be a
tell.
bluffer.
No. No, I'm exaggerating, yes. I think it's a feeling. God is what you feel around you.
That's what you feel, but it's limited to how you feel. But we know that God is an unlimited force. And therefore, we don't know what unlimited is. In our world, everything has a beginning and everything has an end. So unlimited, what does that mean? Where is it starting from? It has to have a starting point where we come from. In the spiritual dimension, it doesn't have to be. That rule doesn't apply. There is no starting point, there is no ending point. It's infinite. In the spiritual world, everything is infinite. So when you talk about the source of those spiritual worlds, which is God, He's the ultimate in infinity. And therefore, if you say that God is happy, then He's not angry, and He's not sad, and you're limiting Him. And that's beyond comprehension. He doesn't sit, and He doesn't stand, and He doesn't laugh, and He doesn't cry, and He doesn't get tired, and He does not full of energy. So what is He then? He's not something you don't understand. That's the only way to say it. But they choose to use the term light and infinite light for whatever reason. The light, because light is the best example of something that starts from one place, but it can go on forever, potentially at least, or the energy gives. And I don't get into that now. That's going off the subject. The bottom line is that you have a power or a force of God, and even calling it a power or force is already a definition that's also no good. We're just using those borrowed terms to give some kind of expression of what we don't understand, of what we can't comprehend. The God that we believe in, that is. The God that we decide who God is and who God isn't, that's not a God that anybody else would like to believe in. When somebody came into me and said once, I don't believe in God, I said, I don't believe in that God either. The God that you don't believe in, none of us believe in. What is God? First, let's see what God is. When we talk about a God, we don't want a God that is limited to the way we would understand or appreciate that God. Because in that case, in 10 years from now, when I may be wiser or smarter or stronger or sweeter or better or worse, then I'll have a different God. We're talking about a God that is undefined and is completely unlimited, infinite in every single area, every single way. When God tells the Jewish people that in the book of Deuteronomy, second portion, chapter 5, in the book of Devarim, and He says, and the Torah describes what Sinai was like. The experience at Sinai was very frightful. for the Jewish people. They came to Moses and said, we can't handle this, we can't hack this. Moses was very upset. He says, you're hearing straight from God and you don't want to hear, you're asking me to intervene over here? I'm just I'm just a human being. I'm a teacher. I'm what comparison do I have to God? And God said, I appreciate what they say. Because I hope that the fact that they were so disturbed, frightened even, by what they saw, so awed by what they saw, will allow them to realize and to remember and to impress upon them, and they'll tell their children that this was a real thing. But then he says, but you didn't see any picture. You didn't see any form. It's not like they saw some old, as George Burns would say, some old man with a long white beard. They didn't see anyone talking to them. But they felt it. They knew it. It was deeper than seeing. It was inside of them. So there's an infinity that is connected to God that is beyond comprehension. It's transcendent. The essence of God. How do you even define that? We don't understand. It's not possible for us to understand that.
Hillel spoke of that. I just remember reading, when Hillel talked about God and how to define God, it's exactly as we're saying.
Hillel.
And Hillel.
And Moses talks about God. In the Torah itself, he says to God, I want to see your face. Now, Moses knows better than anyone else that God doesn't have a face. If he had a face, then he doesn't have a back. But he was asking to see the essence, the inner dimension, like a face represents the inner of the person. I want to see your inner side. And God says, you can't. No person can see me and continue to exist. Once you see God, you're exposed to that godliness, you just become like going back into the sun. You just become lost. So let's see here. Footnote number 41. The need for a miracle underscores the fact that under, quote, normal circumstances, the spiritual damage wrought by the Greeks was irrevocable. Once they defiled all the oil, that was it. It was therefore necessary for there to be a miracle, an event that broke the rules of the natural order to undo this damage. In the language of the mystics, such a supernatural miracle stems from God's most intimate force, his infinite light. So, in order to find that cruse of oil that was somehow overlooked by the Greeks, and they tried very hard to find every single one of them and defile them, didn't pour them out, just defiled the oil. So they needed a miracle to find the oil, not just for the oil to last for the 8 days, but also to find that jar. That was very important to them, to find that little jar of oil that wasn't there. Now let's look back inside in the text. This miracle, right in the middle of the page, this miracle was an expression of the infinite light coming from a higher transcendent place, which transcends Hishtalshalut. The word Hishtalshalut, as we discussed previously, means a chain. And the way God's energy is projected into this world is by chain reaction. It starts somewhere and it ends in another way, each one leading into the other one. But then there's a level of godliness that supersedes this general, regular level coming from the top and going down to the bottom. It avoids that chain and just goes straight down from the infinite light down to the infinite, down to this world. So therefore the rules will be broken, if you will, when that happens. In other words, there's no more chain. Now it's just godliness makes an appearance in this world, and it doesn't look like world anymore. It looks like something miraculous, otherworldly. That's what a miracle is. There are miracles that are couched in nature, but then there are other miracles like splitting the sea and stuff that can't happen in nature, and somehow it happens because that infinite level missed out that chain and just went straight down, and here is God. Bread coming down from heaven. It's pure godliness, pure miracle. In the presence of such light, in the presence of such energy of godliness, even the darkness does not darken. This comes from the book of Tehillim, the book of Psalms, where it says, even darkness doesn't darken. That means it may be dark, but it's not going to cause darkness. And we'll look at 42 in a minute. To the contrary, this light illuminates the darkness so that even the darkness shines. How could darkness shine? Darkness is dark. Shining is the opposite of darkness. As soon as you shine something onto a place that is dark, it becomes immediately light. So if darkness is shining, that's in and of itself a miracle. Whatever that means. So even the darkness shines, and Havaya, with the added word and, will illuminate my darkness. This is a quote from a verse in the book of Shemuel, the book of Samuel, where it says, "V'Hashem yagia choshki," and God will illuminate choshki, choshech, my darkness. But the term for God is the name of Havaya. Okay, so we are going to now discover what all these points mean. First of all, how does darkness not darken? Second of all, what is this name Havaya? And what does the add to the darkness? So let's see footnote 42. A phrase from Scripture, Psalms 139. It is quite obvious that there is no force of darkness strong enough to obscure God himself. God forbid. The same is true of the infinite light, the expression of God's essence. There cannot possibly be an impediment to this light. Moreover, when the infinite light is manifest, even those dark forces that do appear to be in opposition to godliness become illuminated so that they too may shine. The practical meaning of this will be explained below, chapters 7 and 8, where he's going to get into the idea, the concept of why there is darkness in this world. The darkness that is placed in this world, darkness doesn't necessarily mean physical darkness, but that's also part of the problem. As we discussed last night at the Kabbalah service, that after the 7 days of creation, 6 days and the 7th day of rest, there was complete darkness. And Adam was taught how to create fire, how to create light, which is why we make the blessing on the fire by Havdalah on Saturday nights, to commemorate that time that Adam was taught how to make a fire, and the fire brings light, it brings heat, it brings ability to cook and to hygiene, for hygiene, to wash and to wash clothes and pots and so on. Fire is a basic essential for people to live in this world. You can't eat raw food, and you can't cook it without a fire, without heat. So God taught Adam how to light a fire. An angel taught Adam how to light a fire. And that is commemorated every Saturday night when we thank God for fire. But there was darkness in this world, and he had to light up the darkness. That was the point of fire. So darkness in and of itself, plus the dark forces that God puts into this world. And there is darkness all over the place. There are evil people, there are evil things, there are evil and so on, the things that distract and things that take us away from where we are supposed to be focused. All of that, all of those were put here by God. Why did he put it here? So that eventually it should be shown that even the dark forces are really forces from God that are meant to be illuminated. That darkness itself should shine. In other words, it doesn't remain darkness, but you notice that this was the purpose of it. The reason why the darkness was here was in order for it to shine, which again is not possible for us to comprehend in this while we are in this kind of state. The book of Isaiah says that on the day that the Mashiach will come, there'll be this great revelation God lives into the world, we will say, thank you, God, for all the trouble. We can't even think that way. We can't even think that way, and we don't have that much trouble. We have localized trouble. What about the Holocaust? And what about people who lost, dozens of relatives and friends and were completely uprooted and spent 10 years in who knows where, in confusion? Talk about suffering. What about people with children who have disease and children who die or children who are murdered? What about people in Syria? We don't even think about these troubles that are in this world. And one day God will say, one day we will say to God, thank you, God. That must be an unbelievable light. But then we will appreciate the darkness. We will understand why it's there. But once it's gone, thank God. But we will understand where it came from and why it came. That's what it means to illuminate the darkness. Let's see. 45. Havaya. Havaya is one of the 7 primary divine names mentioned in Scripture. Havaya is the colloquial form in Kabbalah and Hakira, which is the philosophy of Torah, of the ineffable divine name, or tetragrammation. U-Y-H-V-H, Yud, Hey, Vav, and Hey. The letters are rearranged as to not pronounce a sacred name. It has those 4 letters of Yah and the other 4, but we say it backwards, Havaya. That's the name of God. So the revelation of Havaya is the greatest, most ineffable name of God. Let's turn the page to 34 and look down in the second paragraph under the line, the continuation of footnote number 47. The full verse in 2 Samuel, it's down on the bottom, beneath the line. The full verse in the brackets beneath the line on the left-hand column. So he mentioned before the verse in Samuel which says, and God illuminates my darkness. The full verse in 2 Samuel reads, for you are my light, Havaya, and Havaya will illuminate my darkness. Hasidus explains that the 2 appearances of the divine name Havaya in this verse correspond to 2 distinct dimensions of Havaya, 2 different levels of Havaya, a lower Havaya and a higher Havaya. The first Havaya refers to Mamale Kol Almin, or imminent divine light, and Hishtalshalut. Hishtalshalut means that chain from where the lamps of the Beit HaMikdash, of the temple, derive. So the first, when it says Havaya, it is a level of godliness that comes naturally, automatically into this world. It's couched by other levels, but it is geared to where it is going. So the source of the light is the temple, but the light comes to the rest of the world in its own form. So a tree looks this way, an elephant looks that way, and a person looks this way. And within the people, billions of people have different ways of expressing themselves, each one according to how much divine light has been granted or given to these people. The second Havaya refers to Sovev Kol Almin, or encompassing divine light, that which transcends Hishtalshalut, above this chain reaction, and from where the Hanukkah lamps derive, which illuminate the darkness, because they come specifically only when it is dark. Now, notwithstanding the vast spiritual distance between these 2 levels of Havaya, one is a transcendent level, one is a regular chain reaction level, notwithstanding that, they are nonetheless connected to our verse by a vav. There is Havaya and Havaya, indicating that they do somehow combine. The word and means and something else, to include something else. That vav translates as and. The deeper meaning of this, during the Greek exile, the spiritual darkness was so intense that the lower Havaya did not illuminate. Thus, it was necessary for God to effect a revelation transcending Hishtalshalut, transcending the regular level, in order to illuminate this darkness. This was the miracle of Hanukkah, that the higher Havaya was able to descend and combine with the lower Havaya. Now, I would like you to turn back the page to page 32, and let's read the final 6 lines again, and now it should make more sense. This miracle was an expression of the infinite light. This is in the text now. In the text, 6 lines on the bottom of the page. This miracle was an expression of the infinite light, which transcends Hishtalshalut, higher than the regular chain reaction. In the presence of such light, which is a transcendent light, even the darkness does not darken. To the contrary, this light illuminates the darkness so that even the darkness shines, and Havaya, with the added and, will illuminate my darkness. In other words, I've connected now, not just to the lower level of godliness, which is pretty good, but I've got now the transcendent level of godliness. I've ended it, I've connected to it, and now I'm able to see godliness, and nothing will obstruct it, nothing will obscure it, nothing will get in the way, which is the concept of the Hanukkah miracle. The Hanukkah miracle, because it was a miracle that did not work as a worldly miracle, like the miracle of Purim, a bunch of chain of events. The king asked for the queen, she said no, he got rid of her, and now he's looking for a new queen. He just happened to like this Jewish girl, who happened to be a relative of Mordechai, who happened to hear about a plot of the assassination of the king, and Haman hated the Jews, he wanted to kill them, and Mordechai asks Esther, who is now the queen, to go see the king, and she takes a risk, and the king says, what do you want? I want Haman in the party, and she tells the king, a series of events lead to an unbelievable miracle, that all the Jews were saved. This was annihilation, men, women, and children. Okay, they were not killed, they were saved. It becomes one of the greatest miracles of the year, up to the celebrations of the year. But that's a natural miracle. It was couched in natural events. The miracle of having a jar of oil lasting for 8 days, that's not natural. There's nothing you can do to make that natural. When you take something that can only last for 1 day and have it last for 8 days, that's not possible, unless there's a miracle. And when you have something that the enemy tried to defile it, and you can't find anything, and all of a sudden they're looking and, they discovered something, that's a miracle. That's not a natural event. Okay. We shall call it quits right here. Thank you for joining us.
Rabbi,
See you
when
next
can
time.
you look up the product?